Right. Welcome everyone to another PartsEdge webinar. This month we're talking about wholesale secrets, profit or loss. And this topic came to us because, especially from Chuck, getting a lot of requests and from our clients about whether or not they should be in wholesale collision business. So we thought, this is a perfect topic to cover. So Chuck, I'm gonna let you take it away, and we're gonna spend about 30 minutes. Is that the goal? Just so everyone.
Probably about 45.
Okay,
I
a lot
could
to cover.
spend 3 hours on this, but yeah, 45.
Please don't.
So,
Let's not do that.
yeah,
And then
no.
if you guys have any questions throughout, just put it in the chat. And we will pause and answer your questions. But go ahead, Chuck.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We kind of preempted we were going to do something different, but one of the things that we've been running into a lot here over the last few months is doing analysis. Most of the analysis we seem to have been doing for the last couple of years were looking at retail gross profit. Um, well, all of a sudden, over the last couple of months, a lot of dealerships have been reaching out to us about profitability in wholesale, especially with collision. And so we thought it would be important because we've had so many of these lately. We've discovered some things as we've looked at wholesale, especially collision. Is it really worth it to be in it? And some of the things I'm going to say today are very pragmatic about it. Some of you may be very large in wholesale. Some of you may be considering it, or some of you may be dabbling in it. What we're going to cover today is the right way and the wrong way, or a way to potentially get out of the business if you're just not making any profit. We'll give you some great examples that can really show what's going on and hopefully help you. So, with that, we'll kick off. And the first thing, looking out at the industry, and I went out and Googled the body shop industry over the last couple of days, and here are some things that I really found out about the way the body shop industry is looking at them as a whole. One of the things that I discovered is there's a lot of consolidation going on. The Caliber collisions and the Don Hudson collisions are buying up the smaller shops because the smaller shops just can't make any money doing what they've been doing. And so they're consolidating. Number two, with rising repair costs and inflation, it has impacted consumer behavior in a positive way with them because people are repairing their cars rather than going out to buy a new one, especially with some of the tariffs and whatnot that is going on. C, the industry has actually found a drop in claims, and basically, this is attributed to factors including fewer repairable vehicles. The insurance companies are totaling them more often, and increased competition, aka back to A, the consolidation and the purchases. And then lastly, the integration of new technologies in, in vehicle manufacturing is making it, a lot harder to repair these vehicles as well. So this is how the collision industry is working at this particular point, what they're thinking, what they're working on. And so that may help you a little bit looking as you decide whether you should be in the collision business or not. Now, what I like to do is I've used this scenario before, and I always like to bring it up no matter when I'm talking about pricing or not. But what I want to do is take you out of the automotive parts operation that you're typically used to working in. And I want to put you in, you're now a fuel station owner. You own a gas station. Yeah, you got other products in there that you sell or whatnot, but you actually sell fuel to make a profit. And this was the best example I could use that would illustrate what I'm trying to get across. And now you're in this scenario and your tanks are empty and the truck comes in and the wholesale price of gas just jumped up a dime a gallon, whether it's unleaded, premium, or whatever. And as we all know, I love this scenario because no one has fluctuation in the pricing as much as fuel stations. and the cost of a gallon of gas. It's in the news at least once a week. Hey, this is up, this is down. But now you as a fuel station owner, here it is, it went up a dime. What would you do? There's 4 scenarios here. The first one is you bite your fingernails and you go, oh gosh, my customers won't pay this extra amount. So you absorb the increase. You leave, it costs you a dime more and you leave your price the same. So you make a dime less in profit. B, you split the cost. You raise the retail price a nickel, even though your wholesale price went up a dime. Or C, raise the price a dime to maintain your profit margin, right? So when you think about that, and then of course there's D, mimic what other competition does. You got 3 gas stations on 4 corners and you're trying to remain very competitive and a penny or 2 apart, but trying to maintain that profitability. Now that you look at this, what do you think the right answer would be? I would like to assume that just about everybody listening here, and if you disagree with me, that's great. It's mainly C, maybe a little bit a D. Maybe it's 8 cents because you got a competition across the street. But now when you think about this, and this is just trying to maintain profitability by C, now what I want to show you, and this happens so often, and we've seen it in some of our analysis lately, and this is why I bring it up, a sustainable pricing for profitability, to maintain a healthy business, you raise it a dime, no question. But now back, putting your dealership hat back on and your parts management 101, putting that hat back on, if your supplier cuts discounts and incentives, would you sit and absorb the cost? I would like to think not. But what we've seen is dealerships, especially in the collision business, have been the bologna in the middle of the sandwich. They leave their discounts alone because they're afraid potentially they may lose that business. And then they struggle to hold the margins. We've had a couple of dealerships lately that we've done some wholesale analysis and found out that they're at 7 or 8% gross profit with a heavy volume. But when you work that back, and we'll show you some scenarios of that going forward, they're basically losing money to maintain this business or this gross, but the gross profit and the net are not following the gross sales. So with that being said, we kind of call it the wholesale syndrome. We're always quick, and we've certainly seen this over the last couple of years, trying to get warranty uplift and whatnot and get that gross profit up on customer pay. We're swift to make adjustments on our retail pricing to try and get our grosses up. But yet, it's almost like the only thing that a parts manager really can control and affect in some instances, because they got a service department and a dealer and internal rates or whatnot, they're pretty much dictated by the service or the dealer principal, whatever. But in wholesale, the parts manager still has that control. And so they don't want to give that up. They don't want to change it. But one of the things when you look at the wholesale facts here, number one, it really does take 4 times as much energy, effort, and resources to generate a buck in wholesale versus retail. And we'll get to the point where we'll explain why it's 4 times more. Okay. The wholesale sale operation to us should always be a complement to your retail sales operation. We see so many places and so many areas where right now the retail is holding up the wholesale. I went and did a seminar about 6 or 7 years ago. I did it for a dealer group in North Carolina with 26 stores, and they were working with a large collision group. I won't mention their name, Caliber. Oops. And we are able to see where they are losing almost 10% based on all 26 stores supplying Caliber, and based on returns and discounts and whatnot, they were losing almost 10%. When we brought that up, the fixed ops director went and talked to the dealer, and the dealer said, no, I'm not going to lose that volume. The dealer wanted to keep it. It was his money out of his pocket. But even though we proved they were losing money in that arena, they wanted to maintain that. So one of the things that I really want to point out here too is maybe you don't just completely get out of collision after you listen to me being very pragmatic about it today, but maybe you start to really investigate your good collision clients that you're making a profit on that have minimal returns, you focus on them, and the people that are floating you for a long time, sending back a lot of returns, that maybe it's time to fire those collision customers and send them to your competition and let them deal with all the headaches. In other words, all wholesale customers do not benefit from your operation equally, and sometimes we tend to do that. Here's a simple exercise that I'll show you that I always like to bring this up because here you got two collision repair facilities that you're doing business with, and you're giving them, 25% off. Obviously, this day and age, they got to be, if you're able to give them just 25 off, you're doing really good. It's more like the 30 and 35 off anymore. But let's say you look at these two customers, you have Accurate Collision, and they happen to be a charge customer. And then you have Cascade Auto Body, and they happen to pay cash on delivery. Well, you look at that volume of sales, and Accurate is about $35,000 more than Cascade. But now when you look at the gross, it's about $8,000 different. The gross profit's the same. But now you look at what they're returning. And Cascade, they pay cash and they only return about 4%, whereas Accurate, they're paying between 30 and 60 days with a float, and they're returning 12%. So as you work that backwards into a net, customer number one has about $2,850 in gross profit returns, which brings that number back down. So anybody in the world who looked at this, would you rather have A or B, would probably say number two, Cascade. And of course, many of you listening here go, well, I'll take them both, but you can see that if you're given the same discount, obviously Cascade should probably get a little better discount than Accurate based on these numbers and the way things are transpiring. So, I brought this scenario up 100 times, and quite honestly, it's pretty outdated, but it's worth bringing up because I heard this at a seminar way back in the 90s by Bob Pearson, and he had this thing called the 25-10 and the 30-5 rule. And I really had to investigate it to see if there was some reality to it. And what he stated is that if you give a 25% discount to a wholesale customer, body shop, whatever, and they're returning 10% or more of what they buy, you're losing money. If you're given a 30% discount and they're sending back more than 5%, you're losing money. And he had factored in things like the return percentage, the types of parts that come back, and I'll explain that here in the next couple of slides. But just to show you that, and I've had people already come back and say, well, you can blow that right out of the water. What if it's the 30-5? What would the 35 be? 35-1? And that's pretty much it. If you're going to give 35% off to a customer, you better get your money quick and they better not return anything. They just keep it when they get it, right? Does that happen? Absolutely not. The the problems we run into in a prostitutional market, in fact, I take that from a parts manager who quoted that to me. There always seems to be someone out there who's willing to give that discount regardless of what returns are coming back. So with all of this being said and setting the table, let's go look at we've got an analysis on a dealership here, and we're going to review the wholesale profitability. I'm going to give you a second to just kind of look at these numbers, but what you can see here is that they've done $1.7 million in wholesale sales. They made 8.8% gross profit. Now, as you look at all the different profit centers underneath that, the counter retail, the internal counter, RO customer pay, RO internal warranty, all the other sales that happened through the parts operation during this time period, they sold just under 1.1 million. So at the bottom, as you look at it, 62% of all the overall gross sales are wholesale or basically collision related. But as you peruse over to the right and look at the gross profit, even though it's 62% of the gross sales, it's only 28% of the gross profit. So just kind of review that, and you can kind of see as you go through. And overall, once you go to the net sales, their gross profit overall as a parts operation is about 21.6%. And NADA standards say you should maintain somewhere between 30 to 32% overall. 30 32%. Here we're looking at 21.61%. So again, at 8.8% gross profit, this gross profit percentage is way too low. And again, the 62% and only 28%, it really just kind of sticks out here. So one of the things you really need to think about, just looking here at this scenario, is, hey, the gross numbers look good, but now what about the net factors that are applied to this? Well, now start applying all your expenses that go into this. Your parts advisor salaries, the benefits, delivery vehicle expenses. Remember, I told you it takes 4 times as much to generate a buck in wholesale as it does in retail. Now you're looking at some of these reasons why. Especially with vehicle expense, depreciation, maintenance, and fuel costs. Let's face it, unless you don't have a part in your emergency purchasing it from a local dealer, you don't really have any vehicle expense in your shop. You know, so the average is about 8,000 a month when you take salaries, benefits, a vehicle, depreciation of the vehicle, the maintenance, and the fuel is about $8,000 that you have for one vehicle. So you got to generate $8,000 in gross just to break even. And of course, then there's some holding costs on receivables. And we talked to one dealer recently. They're at 6.5% gross profit, and they got $300,000 in receivables. Imagine that holding cost in that 60 to 90 day range, which is very typical of body shops. They don't write checks until the insurance company pays them while they're trying to repair the vehicle. They slow pay. But one of the things with those holding costs is we have a couple of dealers that mentioned they've been using pro billing, which I believe used to be Interstate. And the good news is they get their money up front, but that costs them 2%. So these are things you need to factor in as you're looking at it. And one other important thing that I want to bring up here, and this actually works in your favor if you're getting it, one of the things not reflected on this sheet is if you have incentives, if you're doing price matching or some type of incentive discount that you're getting that isn't realized when you're looking at a report like this on the DMS system, you don't get to see, oh, the incentives get clocked back into the wholesale gross or something like that. That could affect it by a couple of percent. But let's say even they had 2 or 3% in incentives that you looked at this, that just gets them up to about 10%. And that's still way too low. Okay. So one of the things when it comes to return percentage as well, and when you think about it, the return percentages that we've seen in the analysis, there used to be and this was NADA, gosh, 15 years ago is the last time I saw it. NADA said that about 12% of all parts purchased by a body shop were returned to the dealership. Well, I'm here to tell you, after we've done about 7 analysis over the last several months, that's more like 18 to 20%, not 12%. Every one of them we've done, the lowest return percentage that we've seen so far, 16%. And when we analyzed that and looked at the types of parts the body shops were returning, they weren't the fast-moving parts. They were all parts that ended up in unfulfilled demand, which I'll show you a slide on that to cover that later. Now, what I want to do, in all fairness, is I want to show you a dealership that's not doing too bad. Here's a dealership where still has a pretty high wholesale rate, about 43, almost 44%. Okay. And I'm going to slow down just a little bit so you can peruse this and see it. Then I'll give you a side by side comparison of the two. But here, they're at 15.1% in gross profit. 44% of their business happens to be wholesale, and it affects 23% of the gross. And yet, when you look at their net sales and their overall gross, they're right about where they need to be at about 29.45%. Basically, here you got a dealership that is working the scenario that probably makes it work much more effectively. So anyway, I'll come up for air for a second and see if there's any questions or, Kaylee, Blake, you got anything you want to add? Well, that was crickets. Okay, well, we'll keep going.
Sorry. You're doing good, Chuck.
Yeah.
No comments, no chats.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So now let's put these two dealerships side by side. What you can see here on the left is the dealership at 15.1% and 44% versus the dealer on the right at 62%. And now you can see that dealer A on the left has generated $97,000 in gross and wholesale at 15.1% versus 158,201 on the dealer on the right. It doesn't take a lot to do the math. The dealer on the left has done $1.1 million less in gross when it comes to wholesale. But yet they've generated 97,000 versus 158,000. They're only $60,000 less than gross. I call that working smarter rather than working harder. And again, when you go down and look at their overall parts department gross profit, there's basically a 7%, almost 8% difference in the net of 29.45% versus 21.5%. So on top of all the other things that dealer B on the right is working on, more returns, trying to come up with more accrual and whatnot to retire that number, it doesn't take a lot to figure out you're working a lot harder to generate that 1.7 million than you did to generate the 649,000. I certainly hope you all see that. Then one of the other things I really wanted to cover here is getting back to the intrinsic value that, Kaylee actually called this the domino effect. And, this is wholesale returns primarily from body shops, almost always compound to forced stock or unfulfilled demand. As we looked at a lot of the return parts from these body shops, again, as I mentioned earlier, we find that these parts are not the fast-moving items, the fender, the fascia, the grill, and the headlights. No, not at all. They're molding, tape stripes, a lot of things that more than likely, the minute you put it on your shelf and write a credit for it, it becomes instant obsolescence on your shelf and has a high probability of finding its way to 12 months. So when you think about that, and the effort and the energy that you're taking to fill this space up and control this more effectively, you start to wonder, am I just really working harder instead of smarter? And again, every dealership can be a little different. In the comparison that we did, you can see it doesn't take a lot to make a big difference, and maybe working smarter rather than harder is a good deal. Now, I'm not saying completely get out of collision overall just yet. If your numbers are really low and you're working really hard, you have some decisions to make. But now I'll show you a scenario I went through. I've done this time and time again, and this is a great evaluation for anyone in the wholesale arena to really see what's going on. Remember, I said that all wholesale customers are not created equal, and there's a lot of truth to that. And so, what we did in this scenario, and this is certainly something that you could do just by looking through your customers and see who is giving you the highest return rate, who's walking you through the slowest and all that. Go through and start categorizing some of your clients based on the way they treat you. And I call it the green light, yellow light, red light. And as we looked at our customer list and we started to evaluate it, we had some really good customers that paid well, had a low percentage of returns, and they bought from us consistently. We gave them the highest discount. Let's say 30%. Okay. We loved it. In fact, this is the green light here. They pay their bills on time. They buy consistently. They send very little back. Now you got a green light customer. They deserve the discount that you're giving to them. But now let's say you get to some customers that are inconsistent in their purchases. Maybe you're a secondary source. They buy erratically. They have a high return rate. They don't buy in a real large volume, or they're very slow at paying their bills. All of a sudden now, we're going to give them 25 off. We're going to treat them like they treat us, inconsistent, and they don't deserve what our good, loyal customers are getting. So we lower their discount rate to get our grosses up. And lastly, of course, red light. Very inconsistent or erratic. They have a high return rate, a lot of complaints, while describing themselves as a great customer. They call up and say, I deserve 30 off. I'm a good customer. Yet you look at their numbers and say, well, your actions don't go with your complaint. We probably have all been that way. And if they're very slow paying their bills, that becomes a big problem. So here, maybe you give them 20 off or even 15 off. What you're trying to do, excuse me for saying this, chase them to your competition. You want these people to go to your competition. Let them complain to them. When we did this, I got a few complaints from our red light customers, and it was really easy for me. I went, well, here's what you've done. Here's what you're doing. And they go, I can go and get 30% off anywhere. I go, good luck. Have a nice day. And I'd hang up on them. I know that sounds terrible, but at that point, what I really wanted to do was focus on my green light customers and put my energy toward them instead of these marginal customers. And we had some yellow light customers who moved into green light so they could get their discount up. They started treating us well, and we treated them well. But the red light customers, I wanted nothing to do with it. My dealer principal put me through a scenario, and this bears, because maybe this is a thought and a way to go through this exercise as you sitting here listening. My dealer principal, he came to me, and I'm sure he had come back from a 20 group meeting, but he came back to me, and we were the largest Chrysler dealer in the country. This is back in 93, 94, right in that area. Dates me a little bit, but still, this is still very relevant. He came over to me, he sat down, and he says, Chuck, what I want you to do is I want you to fire your parts department. Fire everybody in parts. And he said, on paper. Now what I want you to do is just hire back the people that we need to support our shop and our retail business. Kind of a painful exercise going through it, but once I did it, that's what led to that green light, yellow light, red light, just like this, is I finally figured out, boy, I get what he's saying. Okay. Once I did that scenario, it took about a year and a half. We really focused on those clients and really started to put more energy and effort into our shop. And I went from 32 people in a parts operation down to 18, and my net went through the roof. And it was just a scenario where, you don't have a .org next to your name. You're there for a profit. You want to make a fair profit, and you want to have customers who treat you well. There's nothing wrong with that. In any retail industry, that's what we all strive for anyway. And so with that being said, and summing this whole thing up, you should never have to make an excuse for making a fair profit. And some of the dealerships that we've seen where they're giving cost plus 5, cost plus 7, list minus 35. The scenario that they've run into 15 years ago, when you could get discounts, you could get wholesale compensation at some point, you got discounts on stock orders, you got return allowance, maybe you could justify some of those. But as the manufacturer, and that's the problem that we've run into, and that's where we're the bologna in the middle of the sandwich, is you got the insurance industry who totally controls collision. So you get these large conglomerates who come to you and dangle volume above your head. But we want max discount and we're going to return whatever we need and potentially float you. And then on the other side, you got the manufacturer who has taken away a lot of incentives on the sheet metal end. In fact, General Motors, as you all know, they used to have the fascia grill program. They still do, but instead of giving you somewhere between 15 and 17% to order fascia grills, they now give you 4%, but they'll guarantee it as a rim part. But all of a sudden, the reality is forget the guarantee, forget everything else. You basically just lost as much as 12, 13% in discounts that you used to apply. So you should have changed your discount to the body shop when it came to them. Okay. There's a CPVP program with GM as well, which can help. And if anything, I can tell you, being in the collision business and what we see, and we work with some very large collision dealers, you're either all in or you're all out. Where we see dealers that tend to have the highest amount of obsolescence are dealers who contend to be in collision, but they really aren't. They're losing money. And the dealers who have fine-tuned it and could put in a CPVP or a Ford CP order every week and get the discounts to do that. And seeing dealers who can't get that kind of volume trying to compete with these very large dealers, it's next to impossible or really hard to generate some gross profit. So hopefully that helps you all out. If any scenario that you can come up with and look at is do an evaluation. And again, that valuation of firing everybody that you got in wholesale on paper and working it backwards, that's where I promise you're going to find out it is 4 times as hard to generate a buck in wholesale as it is in retail. And, that is my 2 cents on this whole thing. And especially here lately, as it seems like I think a lot of dealers are looking at this and parts managers, because one of the things that we all know has been really hard lately is trying to find employees. You know, Keeping those employees working and educated and whatnot, you end up working a lot harder than a lot smarter. And folks, you know, uh, you're talking to a guy who used to be on that side that I worked a lot harder than smarter. And in some instances, I really finally figured out I was in business for the manufacturer, not my dealer principal, and becoming a fixed ops director and focusing on exactly where I needed to work smarter made all the difference in the world. So I hope this scenario and whatnot. And remember, we can send you this PowerPoint presentation. You'll get a link to it so you can review back to it. But there's some great reports out on these systems. With CDK, you got your PDA that you can go in and look at customers who are abusing you. The reports that you saw, I generated through DealerTrack. You go into a reporting and you do a sales analysis and the reporting mechanism. They're very simple to sit and at least break down over a time period where your profit levels have been and is it really worth it to be in wholesale? Lastly, one of the things, if you decide to get out of this, and this is a couple of scenarios we're facing with some dealer groups, is remember all these things all of a sudden became aero or rim protected. And you decide we're going to start cutting back on our sheet metal. We're going to quit carrying it. Well, remember, you have incentives that you have to worry about, like the PACE incentive or with, Chrysler arrow, all of a sudden you've got a lot of collision parts. So a lot of times what I try to coach people through is you don't turn the faucet off right away. You make intelligent decisions and slowly work your way out of it. You just don't decide, well, Chuck was right. I'm getting out of wholesale to heck with it. If you do, it'll cost you twice as much to get out of it because for several months, you're going to fall out of compliance with the manufacturer because a lot of these collision parts were guaranteed. That's something to really remember as well as you decide whether you should be in it or not. So I hope I get some questions here. Gee, got a couple of dozen of you on here. I'd love to hear any comments or whatnot that you have, uh, and that's where I'll sum it up. Uh, next month we're going to deal with source setup strategies for pricing or whatnot, but I at least wanted to, uh, you know, since we're going through a lot of these comparisons with our clients on wholesale, um, I thought it was really relevant to cover this subject because, incentives are gone, discounts are gone. So, folks, this is the time where, you know, that 10-cent gallon of gas, you got to raise it 10 cents, which means lowering discounts or whatnot so that you can maintain your profitability. And again, I can sum it up all in one sentence. You want to work smarter, make more profit, not harder. There you go. So, okay, with that, looking for any questions that someone might have. Otherwise, I'm going to fade it back to you, Kaylee.
Thank you. And I just realized I didn't put the date for next month, but we always do these on the second Thursday at the same time. And this one we did actually just cover, and it was when I messed up the time. So I figured it was nice to do it again because we've gotten a lot of great feedback on that topic. So I don't think it's talked about enough. It's something that we clearly focus on all the time. So I'm excited
Yeah.
for us to do it again, and then I don't have to create a new presentation.
Yeah, that's the important thing, Kaylee. There you go.
Less work for me.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm sorry that we didn't get more questions. Folks, there are no good dumb questions here. There really aren't. Uh, you know, uh,
What's the question?
yeah, okay, Gabriel. Sure.
Where is the question, though? I don't see it. Oh, he has his hand raised. Okay, maybe just go off mute.
Yeah,
You
just
gotta
go off
allow
mute and
people.
let Gabriel talk. Yeah, there you go. Well, you got to get him off mute.
You should be able to. His
Okay,
mic.
Miguel is typing something in. And Gabriel, you can type your question in if maybe you don't have a speaker on your PC or something, but she did unmute you.
No,
Let's
I
see
can't
here.
unmute him, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You'd have to unmute yourself, Gabriel, but please, type your question in the chat window. Uh, you know, I love questions. I'd love for someone to tell me I'm full of crap, or wow, what a revelation. I didn't realize it, and uh, again, I was in that scenario of, the dealer doing a lot of sales, but very little gross. So I experienced it firsthand, and it took becoming a fixed ops director to take care of it. Okay, Gabriel. He says,
well, there's two
how
questions now, but
Yeah.
go through
All
Rick
right.
first.
So
Yeah.
first we'll do Gabriel, then we'll get to you, Miguel. How would you back inventory levels? You mean back off inventory levels? Is that what you're talking about, Gabriel? Yes. Okay. Gabriel, one of the things you could do, and this is a little insight for next month, is as you sell down some of this inventory, uh, isolate it in a source with a very low day supply and a tougher phase in criteria. That's the way you do it. One of the things that we've been doing with a couple of dealerships are working with getting back to that rim and arrow scenario, an ASR program, is we've developed programs so about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they run it and then they go out into Global Connect or Dealer Connect and go and put those parts on permanent exclusion or take them off so you just don't have them show up the next day. That's one of the things. And if you isolate those kind of parts in a source, you can easily build a report to try and control that and dial back down phasing criteria and days supply. Okay, so Miguel, so what you see in general is over 10% returns because I have a few customers that are under 6. Miguel, if you have a few customers under 6%, God bless you. That's great. That's what you want. What we're seeing, and again, this is an analysis of about 7 stores over the last couple of months. The average is 18%. 18% in returns, and some are a little higher. We have a couple of individual clients, and I won't mention any names like Caliber that are 25% returns and getting a 35% discount. But if one of the things too, that's why you have to separate out collision from your mechanical. What we tend to see, and that's why I really focused on the collision effort here, Miguel, is mechanical, we see very few returns. They have a small return rate, and yet you get to make about 18 to 22% off of a mechanical shop versus that 10 to 12% off a body shop because of those deep discounts. So, uh, hey, that's the red light, yellow light, green light. You got green light customers that are returning under 6%. God bless you, Miguel. Those are the ones you want to keep. What you want to look for are the people who are over that threshold of 10, 15%, returning a lot of parts. And Miguel, if you don't mind chatting, what DMS are you on? Reynolds. Okay. Yeah. So with Reynolds, you can develop some really cool reports in Ignite to just go get your wholesale customers with a specific price code and take a look at what the return scenarios and stuff are. So, you're able to build some dynamite reports to analyze some of your individual customers to see how they're doing, Miguel. Any other questions? Yeah. Hey, you bet, Miguel. Thanks for asking. Okay. Well, and don't forget, after this, if you want to ask an individual question or something like that, you can certainly, you see the email there, info@partsedge.com. You could send your questions through there, and we would be more than happy to respond to that as well. So, good luck, good selling, and uh, hopefully this will help you to make your parts operation more profitable and work smarter. There you go. Kaylee, I'm done talking.
Thank you, Chuck. We'll see you guys next month. And we will send this recording out within the week. So be on the lookout. I did provide the website link because it's on our website to look at past webinars. And then this one will be up there soon.
Yep.
So thank you,
Thank you,
guys.
Sheila and Miguel, for your comments. You guys all have a great day. Thanks so much.